everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lawyers Have Souls Too. I am your host, Winnie Jean-Pierre. Today we have a very special guest. She used to be a family law attorney who traded the crazy world of family law for a more peaceful and calm situation.
Thanks for having me. I am Kayla Harrington. I often refer to myself as a reformed family law attorney. I got there my first day and they're like, surprise, we happened to fire our family law attorney literally the Friday before you started. And here are all the case files to basically manage. So you don't really choose it chooses you. One of the biggest things that I felt in my litigation practice, and when you're on the litigation side, you can really only control what your client is doing. So that part was frustrating, just litigating for like one side and realizing that maybe there were some different factors at play that we could, instead of just slapping the family code onto their situation, we could actually craft like a better solution for what they need.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lawyers Have Souls Too. I am your host, Winnie Jean-Pierre. Today we have a very special guest. She used to be a family law attorney who traded the crazy world of family law for a more peaceful and calm situation. This episode is about anyone who's rethinking about their career. If you are trying to rethink your career path, if you are doing something right now, you want to do something different, we are here to let you know it's okay. She is going to share some insight with you on why she decided to pivot or switch or move, however you want to put it. I think this is going to be great. This episode is going to challenge how you think about conflict, compassion, and most importantly, changes. We know changes are hard, but they are inevitable. Like you have to make changes sometime. Please welcome, we have with us Attorney Kayla Harrington, and I'm going to have her introduce herself. Hi, Kayla. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I am Kayla Harrington. I practice in Texas and I practice mediation, parent facilitation, and I also do work as an amicus attorney, which kind of keeps me in the courtroom, but not in the same type of role. My office is in Fort Worth, Texas, but I do provide virtual services all over the state. And I often refer to myself as a reformed family law attorney, because now I kind of help people come together instead of just fighting for one side.
I love that. Anything interesting about you that you want us to know? Do you have any pets? Do you have kids? Do you have a family?
I have a son. He is 3 and almost a half. Um, and he is a big reason why I pivoted, just time. I have 2 rescue dogs, both random pit mixes, and then 2 cats that were my law school cats. So they are 11 now. And I've had them ever since my 1L year of law school.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Let's talk about, can you tell us a little bit about your background? What drew you to law?
Sure. So I got a bachelor's degree in anthropology. And as you can imagine, there's not a lot of anthropology jobs out there. And I decided really early on that even though my heart wanted to be Indiana Jones archaeologist, that I did not want to do all those classes. And so I switched to sociocultural and linguistic anthropology and absolutely loved it. And I did that as my primary major, and my second major was Spanish. And so at the time, I was living actually in Canada, which is where I did my undergraduate. And I looked around at the market and thought, I don't think there's really anything obvious, at least to me, that I can do right now. And so everyone had told me growing up, well, you're really good at arguing. Of course, like that's a common trope, right? And so I thought I could go to law school. and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought maybe I would do contracts because of the linguistic part of things. And so uh, one of the another fun trope, especially for family law, is that you don't choose family law. Almost never do you choose family law. It chooses you. And so when I was in my 1L year, I thought I was getting a jump on finding an internship in April when everyone else had gotten their internship in January. And I did not realize that. So the only thing that was available for me to get was a job as a family law intern at a small firm, um, kind of in between here, Fort Worth and Dallas. And they looked at me and they said, "Oh, yeah, do you want to do family law?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, I want to do family law." And and so I got there on my first day. And of course, um, there's one of the dogs, speaking of which. Um, so I got there my first day and they're like, "Surprise, we happened to fire our family law attorney literally the Friday before you started. And here are all the case files to basically manage for the general practice attorney. Good luck." And that's how I learned how to do family law. It was a little helter skelter, but I totally fell in love with it. And ever since that summer between first year and second year of law school, it's always been family law or some combination of family law and something else. And that's been pretty much my whole career. Um, Almost all of my internships there forward had something to do with family law. All of my attorney jobs, my big kid jobs have been something to do with family law, whether in conjunction with something else or just straight family law. So you don't really choose it; it chooses you, and then once you get sucked in, you don't really you don't really leave. Um, and so that's kind of how I got into it, and really just decided that I love it. I love helping families, and I got in more on the traditional litigation side first and then was able to make a shift to do the mediation and other things.
Yeah. You have a very interesting background. Let's kind of go back a little bit. Undergrad in Canada. Are you Canadian?
Yeah, so I'm dual. So my family is predominantly from kind of the college town in Ontario. And so that's where I did my undergraduate degree. So I stayed with family, did my degree, and we had lived in Texas before that. So my sister was still here. And when I was looking for law schools, that's really what drew me back to Texas was that my sister was doing her med school here. And so I came back for law school while she was finishing up her med school. And then she did her residency here. So we were able to be close for that.
Oh, both of you were super busy. Her undergrad was not in anthropology, correct? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay, so you guys love language. Do you speak any other languages?
I speak really conversational German, just basic level. We lived in Germany for a little while when we were younger. My sister is older than me, so she really had a strong foundation in it. And I was, I think, between first and second grade when we left. And so I was more focused on learning things like how to read in English versus in German when we came back. And so that language didn't really stick. And then we were in Texas when we had to pick a language to learn. And of course, Spanish is the most useful thing for here in Texas. So that's what I chose.
Okay, perfect. Now, when you look back on your years in litigation, what kind of cases or moments stand out the most?
So I think there's really two kind of different categories of of standout moments. The first is for me when I'm able to forecast almost exactly what the judge is going to do. And just getting to that point in your career where you look at the facts and you're seeing them and you know the judge because you've tried a lot of cases in front of them
Yeah.
and you know what the law is, and you just put it all together and go, I think they're going to do this and this and this and this and this and this. And then you come in for your rendition on a temporary orders hearing or a final trial, and they're just going down going down the same list, and you're like, yep. And sometimes your clients listen to you like, hey, I think this is going to be the outcome, and sometimes that's in your favor and sometimes it's not in your favor. Sometimes clients want to roll the dice anyways. And so that's kind of a neat, from a professional standpoint, anyways, a neat ability to be able to forecast um, when clients are maybe thinking, well, let's just roll the dice. And you warn them, hey, this is what based on my knowledge of this judge, this is what I think is going to happen. And and then it's just straight down the line. This is what it is. And then the other cases are the underdog cases. And so um, I've had a few of those where, parents are being kept from their children on a really extreme ongoing basis. And, we have a big court win where they're reunited with their child after a year of being kept apart by the other co-parent. And like, I just remember one case in particular where they sent me a picture afterwards of like them and their kid, and the kid is just beaming from ear to ear because they get to spend time with their parent that they haven't seen in so long. Um, and a lot of these folks who usually they've gone through the court system in some way or another, and they've been dismissed, or they just haven't really been heard or understood, and being able to develop a case in a way that then we have the outcome that they probably should have had earlier, but just with the right combination of, here are the things that we need and here's how we're going to present them, that we're able to help kind of that underdog client overcome the legal burden to prove their case. And so I've had a good handful of those cases where they're true underdogs, and we build up a really good case and we present it and win. And those have been really satisfying cases.
Yeah. So what made you move away from family law to now being a reform family law?
So one of the biggest things that I felt in my litigation practice, and this was true when I used to work for firms and even when I worked for myself, was that when you're on the litigation side, you can really only control what your client is doing. And so if there's small things like, your co-parent didn't return, clothes that the kid needs for the following week, right? The court's not going to want to bother with those kinds of things. Um, and it's really the result is, oh, well, I'll call their attorney and hope that their attorney reads them the riot act. And then we can kind of hope that it resolves in the future. And that's about it. Because if we go to court and have a hearing over, well, you didn't return these clothes, the judge is going to go, are you kidding me? Can you guys really not co-parent at all? Um, and so that part was frustrating. Just litigating for like one side and realizing that maybe there were some different factors at play that we could, instead of just slapping the family code onto their situation, we could actually craft like a better solution for what they need. Um, that kind of led me to do mediation, and then also like the parent facilitation, just sort of like micro mediation and co-parent education, because I can go between rooms for mediation and help people kind of come up with something that actually works for their family instead of just saying, here's what some stuffy old guys in the legislature have determined is the family code. And that's what the judge would have to put. Right. And so instead of doing that, let's figure out something that actually makes sense for your family. And that was a big draw, was actually creating like an order that creates a system of change for those families in a positive way.
I have a question. So, some website, I still don't know which, but I'm listed on some website as a family law attorney. So, I was invited to a panel. I'm here in Florida, and one of the questions, because obviously they assume I was a family law attorney when I do estate planning. So I was there. I'm like, I'm here to talk about estate planning, and the one question that I got the most was the question about not returning the clothes. That was a big topic. And I sat down, I said, wow, this is really a thing. And at first, when I first heard the question the first or the second time, I was like, that doesn't, I mean, I don't really see what the big deal is. But finally, something just clicked. And I asked one of the parent who happens to be a guy. And he said, my ex-wife is just not returning the clothes. And, I take them shopping every weekend that they're here and she's not returning the clothes. And then so I asked him, I said, why is that such an issue? And he explained it to me. I'm not going to get into the details. And I got it. And I said, oh, because I'm not in that situation or because I don't deal with that on a day-to-day basis, to me, I was like, and I can see how a judge is like, wait, why are we talking about this? So I'm glad you brought that up. In your experience, what do you think? I mean, let's play devil's advocate here. Why? Well, we know why one parent is not doing it, but from the other parent perspective, what do they tell you? Like when they get frustrated over that, is it because it's so minute? Like why are you not returning clothes for our children, right?
Right. I think a lot of it, and I see this a lot on the parent facilitation side of my work because I work with people over many sessions and over a long period of time to help kind of micro mediate these small conflicts that the court may not address and come up with a solution. That there are so many little tiny details of actually living out their order that then, whether it's you didn't send the soccer cleats or you didn't wash the jersey or when you returned the teenager's truck, you parked it in front of my house and I had to see you, and can you actually park it on the side? Like, there's so many little minute things that go on in the day to day of helping families, co-parent, make decisions, set expectations, and kind of have just kind of basic respect for each other and each other's time and what they're doing with the child, that, those little tiny micromanaging things don't get litigated. And so I think with mediation and with parent facilitation, those are able to be handled in a way that everybody can be on board and be on the same page, because it gets frustrating, right? If you need that special shirt that you sent or that polo shirt for picture day that's coming up and the other parent doesn't send it back and you're sitting there like, how could you not know? Right. um and then all of a sudden they don't do something else, or they sign them up for an extracurricular without talking to you, or and it just snowballs, right? It just snowballs, and then you get so frustrated, to the point where you really can't co-parent effectively. And that's the hard part is, once you kind of get up to all these little tiny things, all of a sudden you have a mountain of stuff and you can't really co-parent effectively.
Yeah. How did your view of winning change once you start doing mediation?
So obviously in a traditional like litigation sense, right? Winning is I have a requested relief that lists out all the things that my client wants that I'm putting forward to the court and how much of that punch list did we get, right? Um, Sometimes it's 100%, sometimes it's 90, 80, 70, whatever it happens to be. Some things are more important, some things are less important. And instead of having a punch list, now it's, did we craft an order that's livable, right? And so if if we go into a mediation, I'm mediating, I'm neutral, and so I'm not advocating for one way or the other.
Right.
Uh, but I'm helping people come up with something that actually makes sense for their lives.
Mhm.
So sometimes one of the parents might say, I want a 50-50 schedule. And I go, great, here's where they go to school. What's your plan to get them there? And they go, oh, yeah, I guess that doesn't really work with my work schedule, does it? And, and so we sit there and say, okay, well, is there some way that we could kind of make it work? Or could you take them to school and do a slightly longer weekend and take them to school just on Mondays? Or, be a little bit more flexible and creative. And so that to me is a win, right? When we are able to sit down, we look at schedules, we look at assets, we look at how are we going to do this? What does an actual livable order look like for you guys? Um, and then that is what we craft as our mediated settlement agreement.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask you questions about, having clients that have unrealistic expectation or they give you a laundry list of things and you're like, I don't know if that's going to work out. How do you deal with that?
So a big part of it is I rely really heavily both on having had a litigation background. Um, and most of the mediations that I do are in Fort Worth or they're in surrounding counties to my county. And so I typically know most of the judges and how they look at facts and what the family code says. And so I'm able to kind of help guide them through, okay, this is, totally outlandish, or this is, I'm not really seeing that you have evidence to support this claim. Here's how the judge might look at it. This is, these are some of your options. And they're lawyers, because usually these folks have their own representation. We'll explain to them, what the pros and cons are. And there's a lot of regulation, a lot of kind of co-regulating. I use the Bill Eddy's ear statement, so empathy, attention, and respect,
Well,
in order to kind of disarm disarm people when they're getting really elevated, really dysregulated. Like, I want this. This is a non-negotiable, and go, okay. I I understand that it's really important to you. Like, I hear that spending time with your child is super important, or keeping your retirement intact is super important. Like, I really respect that. Let's talk about how that would look. And so the other thing is to really um, kind of send the problem back to the person, especially in those high conflict situations. I deal a lot with high conflict. The parent facilitation work that I do is all cases that are earmarked as high conflict. And so I use a lot of those techniques to help disarm people who get dysregulated, let them know that I don't necessarily agree with them, but I hear them and I understand that I hear them. And then once we have kind of calmed down and become regulated, we look at, okay, these are your options through court, or we can craft something today. Right. And I always tell them, like, we can not have we can not have an agreement today, and that's fine.
yeah.
Right. It doesn't, that's totally fine. And if they want to roll the dice, great. But if they want something that's tailor made for their family, now's the time to do it. And we can be as creative as we really want. And so that usually gets people thinking about, okay, what do I want? Um, and we kind of go from there. And I kind of put the ball back in their court of what would that look like, right? If we had a schedule that fit your work schedule, what would that look like? And usually that puts the problem solving back on them instead of on the mediator.
That's good. What are some misconceptions that people have about mediation, especially divorcing couples?
So probably one of the biggest misconceptions is that, well, first, I know at least in Texas, we mostly practice separate caucus or shuttle mediation. So people are in their own space with their own attorneys, and then the mediator moves back and forth. And the other, um, I don't know if every state has that as their norm. Some states might do everyone together, but I know here people freak out. They're like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to be in the same room as them? And here the answer is no. Um, because we want everyone to be able to like talk it out, brainstorm without being like pinned down. Well, you said this. It's like, oh, well, it was just a suggestion. We were just talking it out. So people get to be in their separate spaces. The other misconceptions are that like the mediator is going to be the one that comes up with your solutions or is going to like force you to sign something or force you into a some sort of agreement, whether they settle or not. That's not really what is important to me. It's really whether or not they actually came to the table and tried to be creative and come up with a solution. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception, is that, the mediator is going to be the one that just decides who's right, who's wrong. It's like, no, y'all are coming up with your own solution. And I just kind of guide you through that process, um, you know, and make sure that we've got everything written up and we can submit that to the court.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you deal a lot with high conflicts cases. How has this transition affected you personally when it comes to stress level, conflict, or, just your overall outlook on things?
Yeah. So I think the transition has been better. Obviously, like I said on the beginning, I have a 3-year-old, and so my time, I'm able to control my time a little bit better, and that to me is the biggest thing. Is that I'm not getting a motion and an order setting a hearing that's going to be in 3 days at a time that maybe I can't make it, and or maybe I have something else set and all of a sudden I have to scramble, or we're dealing with like true crisis emergencies that need court intervention. Um, a lot of the times I'm on a set schedule. If I have a couple of co-parents that need like an emergency session, I have like a 15-minute, we just have one thing that's really grinding our gears that we can't set out, um, you know, in a few days or a couple weeks. And so people can come together and work that out quickly and come to resolution from a parent facilitation standpoint. So, really, the schedule part of it, I don't mind working with high conflict people. Um, I have a bit of a knack for it. And so that part doesn't really bother me or faze me. But being able to control my schedule has made things just a million times easier and less stressful.
I think that's true for everyone. I think that's true for everyone. And, that's why, when we had the ability, when we find out, when the rest of the world, because, a lot of us didn't know that, working from home was a thing and that we can be super, active and productive and being able to get things done when we control our own time and when we do things. I think that it's always great when you have a little bit of control. That always help. Now, do you feel like there are some cases that mediation is just not the right path for?
Yes. Yeah, there's definitely a few cases, um, few categories of cases. For me, we always do a domestic violence screening on the intake. And so if there is especially recent, and I say recent as in last 6 months to a year or even sooner, or ongoing domestic violence, that to me is not really going to create um, a conducive environment for mediation. Even though people are in separate spaces, there's still that element of control and fear that's at play that may result in maybe an agreement that feels oppressive to the person who is abused. And so I always try to screen those cases out as best I can because, at least in my practice, I don't want to be the mediator that has somebody come in and go, well, I felt really scared that maybe that they were going to come over if I said no to that proposal and they were going to bust in the room or they were going to find me in the parking lot after. Um, and so those we really try to screen out. The other times that I've seen it be pretty ineffective are when there are true personality disorders. And I'm not talking about just oh, my co parent is a narcissist. Like, I'm talking about true diagnosed. They have a psychiatrist, there's things going on. Um, because there can be a sense of, um, everyone's out to get me or moral superiority that just doesn't lend itself to mediation. Those folks, they think sometimes they think they're right, right? No matter what, like I have the best solution and anyone else is going to be wrong about that. And so when people walk in with those attitudes, um, and particularly if they are formally diagnosed, usually it's not going to be appropriate to mediate.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Um, how do you help the clients focus on the future instead of being stuck in the past? He cheated on me. This happened and that happened.
Yeah, I love that question. So that is a really big thing. So a lot of times if I have someone in the room, off the top is that we take about 5 or 10 minutes and I just listen to them. I
Hmm.
listen to them first,
Let it all out.
let it out, right? If they need to cry, if they need a few minutes to, compose themselves after, um, because the worst thing I feel like is just to straight shut them down, right? If they feel like they have been hurt, there's been a wrong, there's been an issue, um, I need them to feel like they have told me about it. And then I can say, okay, this is how these courts typically handle this type of situation. That's how it either does or doesn't affect your case. And so, and a lot of times it's someone that they have to co parent with. And so we talk about, you know, well, did they ever do anything that was harmful towards the child? If the answer is no, okay, well, they can be a bad spouse and be a good parent, right? Um, and so we tend to I tend to try and listen to them, give them a few minutes to kind of regroup and calm themselves, explain how the courts or the family code handles the situation, and then give them the opportunity to kind of think, okay, well, going forward, the court's gonna have you co-parent with this person. So, if we do pick up and drop off from the school and you don't have to see them in person, would that be helpful for you? And sometimes I go, oh yeah, that would be actually pretty nice. And so we start working on a plan of like, what would be the least amount of conflict if you still have those really strong feelings about the situation. How can we reduce the conflict between the two of y'all as you're still healing? And so that's that's a really big part of the practice is uh, helping people feel heard, and then you have a better mediation outcome because they know that you know the situation, they feel like they've been heard, and then they're able to kind of release that a little bit, understand where the courts are coming from, and then how they can actually have the control to reduce co-parenting conflict in the future by crafting their order.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. What advice would you give to attorneys that are specifically working in family law and that are thinking about making a change? What would you tell them?
Do it. Uh, do it. Um, it's it's one of those things where even with, with mediation, with, um, there are, even in my county, I'm in Tarrant County in Texas, and there's a lot of mediators, and yet there's still a need for mediation, right? There's so much demand to try and get folks to be able to come up with their own solutions that work for their families. And so, especially if there's attorneys that are in like a more rural area, um, where there maybe aren't as many mediators, because we can only wear one hat in a case, right? So like when I talk about being a mediator and a parent facilitator and an amicus attorney, I can only wear one of those hats in any given case. So for example, I mediated a case that was um, really good option for parent facilitation, and they could use some co-parent education. And I was talking with one of the attorneys about it, and they said, "Well, I guess we can't use you as a parent facilitator." I said, "Sure can't. My mediator hat is on for this role and this case, and that's it." And so there's a lot of people or attorneys or even therapists or whatever that get conflicted out from the different roles. Um, and so if you have somebody who's doing a child custody evaluation, they can't be the mediator, or if they're the amicus attorney, or the parent facilitator, they can't be the mediator. And so there's more than enough work to be had. And so I just say do it. And even if you're still running a full docket of litigation cases, if you just, you know, pick a day every week or every other week that you're open to start, and let the people, your colleagues know, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. These are what my rates are. You got to be loud about it, right? To make sure that everyone knows, like, oh, yeah, Kayla's doing this, or this is what Kayla's rates are, or this is what, she's doing parent facilitation. She's, available to be appointed as an amicus attorney. Then you'll just build your practice to where you don't need those traditional litigation cases anymore.
Yeah. So for the average person, what is an amicus attorney?
So, an amicus attorney is, at least in Texas, it's a friend of the court. And what our role is to basically go out, almost like an extension of the court, to go investigate what is in the child's best interest. So that means going to the child's home with mom and dad, announced and unannounced, meeting with the child at school, um, going to talk to collaterals, so family members, family friends, um, friends of parents, teachers, reviewing all sorts of records to kind of advocate for the child best interest. And so we don't represent the child themselves. So if we have a kid say, well, I want to do this or I want to do that, that's not our function, because that would be, at least in Texas, an attorney ad litem, which is the child's attorney. But for the amicus attorney, we help the court investigate what is in the child's best interest. And so we have the same function as being able to file different motions with the court. We have the ability to subpoena witnesses and records and present those in court, cross examine witnesses. So it's really kind of a cool role. And again, it's kind of a similar vein of diving into a family system and getting to know kind of what's going on, and then using skills as a lawyer to help advocate for what's in the best interest of the child.
Yeah, that's great. So now we are going to get a little bit personal. What do you do for fun? I know you have a 3-year-old now, so I don't know how much fun you're having.
Uh, So for me, I garden. So I've gotten into finding Texas natives. Uh, and so we have several plant sales twice a year that I'll go to, and get some native plants. And we're slowly replacing our lawn with native plants, because I just find lawns to be kind of frivolous. And I really like all the butterflies and the bees, and we have lizards. We have all kinds of lizards that live in our front yard. And the good thing for me is that my kid loves that. He loves picking out the different colored plants. And so we go out to the plant sales together, and he helps me pick out the different plants that we want to get. And then he helps me dig in the garden beds. And then we get to enjoy the butterflies and the different lizards that live in our front yard. We have some green anoles, and right now we're getting some monarch butterflies. So that's been that's been most of the fun right now.
I love that because he gets to do it with you. That's great. That's amazing. Well, let's just hope you guys can keep that up. Just still, with the plants and the gardening. Um, so obviously this podcast is called Lawyers Have Souls Too. And I always ask people this question and let them tell me why they think, it's true. And I'm going to have you finish the sentence for me. So lawyers have souls too because.
Let's say lawyers have souls too, because we really do care about the struggles and the injustice. Um, so I've seen a lot in terms of the firm that I was with before I started my own practice was both criminal defense and family law. And so just seeing the ways that the systems, um, they are broken in some ways, in a lot of ways, or discriminatory, or what have you. And so just knowing the depths of not only like my heart and my colleagues' hearts, and um, knowing how fiercely they fight because they have such strong opinions about fighting injustice and holding people accountable to, if you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, or you have to prove clear and convincing evidence, that like they need to be held to that standard in order to prove those things and overcome those burdens. And just how strongly and how passionately, myself and my colleagues that I now work towards their clients' goals and try and advocate for them. Um, I think that just really shows that lawyers do have souls, because they're trying so hard to make sure that everyone's stories are heard, that they get their day in court, that they get, or they get a resolution that actually works for them, and their situation. And every case is different in what you need. Do you need to go to trial because you need to have your day in court, or do you need to be able to craft your own experience or your own order in order to live it? And I think all of my colleagues are really intentional with that. And that just kind of shows me that, they have a really a deep soul in their regard for their clients.
You know, this is one of my favorite thing to hear because every time I have a guest here, they always say the same thing. I am grateful and happy to hear that we all have colleagues who actually care because I don't think this is something that you should be doing if you don't care. It takes a lot mentally, physically, emotionally. So everyone that comes here say, hey, my colleagues really care about what they do. I have people around me that really are really trying to help. And we can't do much, but I think that each and every one of us is just trying to help make this world a better place somehow. So I'm always happy to hear that. So now, how do we find you? Whether we follow you, if people are in Texas and they need to do mediation, which they should, how do they reach you?
Yeah, so the best way is on my website is harrington.law. So that keeps it really easy. It's just harrington.law. And then there's tabs for each of the different things. So if you want to do mediation, there's a tab with forms and they can look at the calendar for mediation times, in person in Fort Worth or virtual anywhere in the state. And then there's a tab for parent facilitation with all the forms, amicus attorney, same thing with all the forms. And then if they want to follow me on social media, my TikTok handle is at Lawyer Kayla. And so they can follow along the day-to-day there.
All right, sounds great. It was such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so, so much for being here. I hope that we can I'll have you come back at some point so we can do a follow-up, see how things are going. Now you have a 3-year-old, so we know you're very busy. So I appreciate your time. And it was great having you. Thank you so, so much, Kayla. I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Alrighty. All right, everyone. This was an amazing episode, right? And again, I think this is for anyone looking to transition, anyone who is going through some type of something, right? And you think this is the only way, the court is the only way. There are so many other options out there. Mediation is big and it's in every state. So this is something that you should definitely look into if you or someone you know is going through some kind of conflict. I mean, the most popular ones are people going through divorce, but it could be any type of conflict. It might seem that the courtroom might be the best place, but like Attorney Kayla said, you can actually sit down and, put on paper what you want to happen and come to a resolution. Why not take that route instead of spending thousands and thousands of dollars going back and forth and the headache? So if you are trying to transition from one area to another, I think this episode should help you kind of make a decision. And if you are a family law attorney and you want to be reformed, I think Attorney Kayla just told you what to do. Just do it. Thank you all. I'll see you next time for another episode. Bye-bye.